Hello there, world, wherever you are, and welcome once again to the There Will Be Geek podcast. With me are my esteemed colleagues. On my left, we have Cav.
Hello.
And on my right, we have Shani.
Ahoy, hoy.
And I'm Mike, and this week we are going to be talking about any number of different things, but we will be starting with our regular Thimble of Win podcast section. Cav, what is your Thimble of Win for this week?
Okay, for this time around, it's got to be Penny Dreadful. As a lot of you know, its third season wrapped up a couple of weeks ago, only it did things slightly differently than normal. The season finale ended with a pretty huge event. I'm not spoiling anything, because you should all be going and watching this series, because it's fucking fantastic. But it ended with a pretty major event, and then the caption, "The End." At which point they announced that it was the actual end of the series itself.
Oh.
They basically wrapped everything up by surprise. It was a great finale. It's an amazing show. If you haven't been watching it, catch it up. One of the great things about it is not only is it one of the best things on TV, it's now a case of one of those few series which actually isn't too long to get through. It's only 3 seasons, and it actually ends. It wraps everything up in a fairly good way, which is doesn't happen very often. Now, there's been conflicting stories about it. John Logan, the showrunner, has said that it was always the plan, that it was always going to finish this way, and he had this huge master plan. Now, Showtime have claimed it was cancelled. It appears the most sort of persistent rumor at the moment is it was somewhere in between. Basically, Logan came out and decided he was going to end this season with the big, huge event that I was talking about that essentially would have changed the entire nature of the show. And the rumor is that Showtime stepped in and went, well, in that case, we're ending it here. We're going to cancel after this season. Which I think, if that was true, is good decision-making on all parts. I think that it's an incredible show, but the characters in this show is very much a melancholic aspect to it. These are characters who aren't happy people, who have a tendency to make decisions that lead to more unhappiness. And I think if it had gone much longer, it would have led to a point where it might have gone too predictable.
I have to say, I've not seen much of Penny Dreadful, but one of the things that has always impressed me a great deal is the cast is very, very impressive.
Yeah, awesome cast. If you aren't all worshipping Eva Green, you should be by now. I mean, not only is she one of the most gorgeous women in the world, my God, that woman can act. And
exactly.
She basically is the heart and soul of the show, and she's amazing.
And on top of that, throughout the run of the show, you've had a massively interesting other cast. You've had Timothy Dalton, you've had Rory Kinnear, you've had Billie Piper, you've had Josh Hartnett, you've had a large amount of really not just good actors, but well-known good actors who it only increases the profile of the show. So yeah, it's a good show, this.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. I mean, for those who aren't familiar with it, it basically combines, it's set in the Victorian era and combines several famous literary monsters from that period. So you have Frankenstein as monster, Dracula plays a part, the Wolfman, but done in a very sort of dramatic, character-based setting. Anyone who's read Anno Dracula by Kim Newman, I think the people who made this show had read that book because it takes a very similar approach. And it's a wonderful show, and I'm sad to see it go, but at the same time, I think it was best to end where it did. I think it could have used a few more episodes, just to sort of help flesh out where some of these character arcs were going. But really, better that than to drag on for another 3 or 4 seasons and decline in quality like we've seen so many other times before.
X-Files.
Yes.
Heroes.
Yep, we've all been there. And look, it means it's only 3 seasons. If you haven't watched it already, do so. Go for it. It's fucking amazing.
Okay, that's fantastic. Well, that's your Thimble. What about you, Shani?
Mine is to do with BioShock. Now, BioShock is one of my ultimate all-time favorite games, along with Silent Hill. Like right now, I am wearing a BioShock t-shirt. It says, "Would you kindly?" But what is going on with Bioshock is that it is currently being remastered for the Xbox One, PlayStation 4, and coming out on PC as well. And what this collection includes is Bioshock, Bioshock 2, and Bioshock Infinite. It also has all the DLC for those 3 games. The only thing that is going to be missing, though, is the multiplayer for Bioshock 2. That's not being included, but that's no real big loss anyway. I did spend some time playing the multiplayer when it came out, but not a lot of people were actually spending a lot of time on it, so it's not really a huge big loss for me. It's going to be coming out in September, so the 15th of September, which is great. I get paid on the 15th. Guess what I'm going to be buying?
I wonder.
Yeah, just a little bit. I already have it on like Xbox, every platform that's available on. I've got it on Xbox 360. I've got it on PlayStation 3. I've already got a PC copy, but I'm going to be buying this copy as well too. So I'm going to have it like everywhere. But if you are somewhere other than Australia, it will be launching in North America on the 13th of September and internationally everywhere else on the 16th.
And if I remember correctly, if you have them on PC, on Steam, I believe you actually get the remastered versions for free. I think so. I'm pretty sure. Check that, people. If I'm wrong, yell at me in the comments.
You can send the bills
That's
to Cav.
fine. Yeah.
He'll pay for them. It'll be fine. But this is something I'm very, very excited for. Like, I am a huge Bioshock fan. If I could, I would go live in Rapture. You know, it's somewhere off Iceland. It's off the geological. Yeah, where they found it. I'm planning a trip on there one day. I'm just going to go take a ship out in the middle of the ocean just to where Bioshock, where Rapture should be in this world. Just take a photo. Just me at those coordinates. But yeah, that's what I'm absolutely pumped and psyched about. Like, I will replay Bioshock again just to do it.
Okay, well, for me, and I think to an extent for all of us, there is only one thing. I have a colleague and friend of the show, Travis Johnson, to thank for this because he drew my attention to this. There is a man coming to visit Australia. We're based here in Melbourne. He comes here on August the 28th. He will be on Sydney on August the 24th. We are getting the one, the only, the muscles from Brussels, Jean-Claude Van Damme. Yes, that an evening with Jean-Claude Van Damme at the Melbourne Exhibition Centre on August the 28th. I believe tickets go on sale on July the 12th. I'm really kind of excited. Now, not because I have a big particular obsession with Van Damme, but he is just cool.
He's so cool.
The idea of someone like that, it's someone... I mean, for example, once a year we tend to get Schwarzenegger come here now, and he does these kind of big symposiums to do with bodybuilding and business and a whole bunch of things like that. And I can sort of see that, but Schwarzenegger as an actor is an interesting one, but he's always been much more than an actor, and I respect him a lot for it. But with someone like Jean-Claude Van Damme, it is you're a cool person from popular culture who I wouldn't have expected to see doing this. This is going to be very, very interesting.
The only thing that would have made it more perfect is if instead of doing it in a normal theatre, it was one of those sort of river cruise things. Because then, like, he'd gather everyone outside on like the shore, and then he could tell everyone to get on his boat and go up river.
Hey, people have died.
Now, who wants to go with me?
People have died hell. Jesus,
I've died here.
I want to know if he's bringing his dog.
I don't think he will be. Remember all of the fuss with Johnny Depp and Amber Heard and Barnaby Joyce?
I know, but I just want to see a show-off between Barnaby Joyce and Van Damme.
Even better, he can steal Johnny Depp's dog. Johnny Depp, you sick son of bitch. Got your dog, son of bitch. Get on my board.
But yes, the idea of Jean-Claude Van Damme giving Barnaby Joyce a massive roundhouse kick to the face. I'm sure that's something that many other Australians can get themselves behind. Anyway, I'm just going to give Johnny a moment to compose herself here.
And what we do, by the way, just wanted to mention as well, we mentioned Travis Johnson of Filming. The guy's actually an old friend of mine, old film school buddy from Perth. Follow him on filming. The guy's fucking great. Proud as punch that he's there. So, yeah, follow his stuff. He's really good, like.
And we will be referring back to Travis a little bit later on.
Son of a bitch.
You know what I was saying about edit points?
I haven't been laughed at this much since I made Time Cop.
See, that's the other thing. Maybe we should just get Dolph Lundgren aboard.
Oh, Jesus. Alright, I was just going to get a drink. I'm
Okay,
fine.
there's a... yeah. Okay.
Get them together. Do that DIY show they've always wanted to make. Universal Solder.
A mouthful of cork. Oh, Jesus. Oh, Jesus.
Next time on There Will Be Geek.
Okay, I'm back. I'm composed.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to your edit of this on Monday, Kev. Okay. All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, I think now it's time for us to dial 555-2368 and call these guys.
It will haunt you every night. Whatever they are, no one should have to encounter that kind of evil. Except you girls, I think you can handle it.
Oh, good. Thanks.
Somebody is trying to unleash the dead on New York City, and we may be the only ones that can save it.
Why am I operating the untested nuclear laser?
You have the longest arms. Fire!
Oh, these women are just sad.
I'm sure she just misspoke.
Sad, bored, lonely, sad women.
Oh.
Hello. I'm here about the receptionist job.
Hi. You're hired.
God, you're all sweaty. There are people out there that need our help.
Okay, got it. We need to form a group and build something to fight these damn ghosts.
That's exactly what we already do here.
We're the Ghostbusters! Something big is gonna happen.
I think the word we're looking for is apocalypse.
I will kick the unliving crap out of you, and you, especially you.
We don't want mass hysteria.
Get out of the city! Get out of the city!
Kevin, can you answer the phone?
I can't. It's in the fish tank.
The one on the desk.
Oh, that one. What's the place called again?
Conductors of the Metaphysical Examination.
Got it. Ghostbusters.
Patty! Don't move!
You got a,
No, I'm tired.
No.
Listen.
I'm just gonna go ahead and take off. How about that?
I don't really think that's a good idea.
No, going to take off. Don't upset the ghost. Really?
The main meat of our discussion this week is going to be, as you heard from that last trailer, Ghostbusters. That was the most recent trailer for the upcoming movie, which we'll be reviewing in a future podcast. But for the moment, we're going to be dealing with Ghostbusters in terms of its history, its past, its present, its future, and all of the various different minutiae in between. So, first of all, Ghostbusters from 1984. What are your thoughts?
I love that fucking movie. Yeah, it's sort of, I always describe it as like Star Wars was my first cinematic love. Ghostbusters was my first cinematic obsession. I was crazy about it as a kid. I think I saw it in the theaters maybe 13 times, I think, over the space of a couple of years. Remember, this was back before the home video time when they would keep re-releasing movies to the theaters. Hugely influential on me, I think, in terms of like my own sort of humor. I absolutely adore the movie, and it never gets boring.
All good things come out of 1984. I am a testament to this. So obviously I wasn't old enough to see this movie when it was actually around the first time. So I saw it later on when I was just a little bit older. And I just thought it was always just so much fun. Like, it was colourful. It was funny. Like, you can't not find Bill Murray hilarious. And Slimer as well. I remember all like the toys that were around. I think it was mainly Ghostbusters 2 is when I was brought into it, and that's when I first saw the first Ghostbusters. But it was just so much fun. And yeah, I just have positive feelings and nothing bad about it.
I think certainly for myself, like Cav, it was one of those seminal moments of my childhood. I'd just moved from one end of the country to the other. I remember being taken to go and see the movie by my elder brother, who was in the Navy and stationed just down the road in Portsmouth at the time. And I was mesmerised as to how good this film was. I was completely and utterly in love with it. I think most people in and around my generation were. We were captivated by this. I mean, I was 8 years old when this came out. And it just blew my brains out entirely. It was loud, it was funny, it was silly, it was sci-fi, it was all of the nonsense, but beautifully judged. At the time, when I was growing up, certainly when I became to be a teenager and I realised that all of the people involved had been in Saturday Night Live, I always assumed that this had come from an SNL sketch, like many of the other things like the Blues Brothers or Coneheads or what have you. But apparently that's not the case.
No, Dan Aykroyd basically has always been known as a huge paranormal nut, and he'd been cooking up this idea for several years, originally for him to do with John Belushi. From what I've read, his original conception was much larger in scale, sort of involving several different dimensions and lots of crazy stuff, and it eventually got sort of honed down into the Ghostbusters we know and love. I think mainly because after Belushi died, it was taken up by Ivan Reitman, the director who'd worked with Bill Murray and Harold Ramis on films like Stripes. And it was sort of reworked into a not quite as sort of out there version, a much more down-to-earth sort of storyline.
Okay,
and became the movie, Not necessarily, actually. I mean, I think it was one of the great things about the original movies that it is an adult movie. A lot of the jokes, work better for adults. Like one of the wonderful things about sort of growing up to being a fully fledged film geek was going back to Ghostbusters and realizing how many of the jokes I didn't get when I was a kid because they were aimed towards adults.
Oh, I watched this recently and I haven't picked up any of this stuff. Maybe I'm still just a kid. I'm just not picking up all these adult jokes.
A lot of it's sort of the wittier sides and sort of the wryness of it, I think. The humor's a lot sort of more subtle than what was done later. And I think it's one of the movie's great strengths. It has this very kind of wry, almost cynical, not quite cynical, but almost there kind of humor.
I think, and also one of the things that I've mentioned this before, there is a certain element of, it sounds weird to say this, but verisimilitude. And that sounds weird because this is a film with ghosts and lasers and things like that. But at the same time, the way everything looks, this is still a point in the 80s where you've still got that massive debt owed to 70s cinema where everyone is dressed as normal people in New York at that time would have been dressed. They're schlubby. They're slightly down at heel. Everything is a little bit careworn here and there. They're dressed in normal suits. They're not all in weird kind of primary colours and so on and so forth. And there is an element whereby everything looks and feels like they are a bunch of guys who are just doing a dirty blue-collar job.
Yeah.
They are basically exterminators for ghosts. And there is that element of everything just looks and feels normal, outside, obviously, of the big special effects scenes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important thing because it grounds the movie really, really well. It makes all of the characters much more easy to believe in because of the fact they seem real. And I think one of the best parts of that is an accidental casting because, to my mind, I think I'm correct in thinking that Ernie Hudson was not first choice for Winston Zeddemore.
No, it was Eddie Murphy, who at the time was absolutely huge.
Yeah.
But wound up not being involved, and that's when they got in Ernie Hudson.
And I think that's one of the things that really helps on this, because had Eddie Murphy... I mean, we were discussing earlier on today, Trading Places.
Oh, that was great.
Trading Places, he is brilliant with Dan Aykroyd. I mean, you've got Trading Places, you've got Beverly Hills Cop, you've got Coming to America, you've got a whole bunch of really, really good films with Eddie Murphy front and centre in there. Eddie Murphy in this would have been too much, particularly when you see the Winston Zeddemore character being introduced later on, because it would have been something that would have completely stolen everything, whereas Ernie Hudson coming in grounds everything perfectly.
Yeah.
Because he's the guy who doesn't have advanced degrees. He's just a guy coming there and doing a job.
Yeah, it's your regular Joe kind of.
Yeah.
He kind of grounds things and he contextualizes everything. Whereas if you have an Eddie Murphy, his job, his particular role is to be the star and to be this comedy cannon who's firing on all cylinders all the time.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't have worked for that character.
No,
It would have overwhelmed
it
it.
would have just been him and Bill Murray kind of battling for the attention of the audience, which would just distract from the whole movie. You just be like, all right, well...
And this is the thing, again, with those four main characters, they are all people who... Everyone has a particular role. Bill Murray is, without question, the leader of the group. Dan Aykroyd is, without doubt, the kind of the soul and conscience of the group. Harold Ramis is the guy who is the tech guy who knows all the information. Ernie Hudson and Winston Zeddemore is the guy who is kind of the guy who grounds it all. Everyone there has a particular role, and no one steps on anybody else's toes.
Yeah.
And the casting as well. I mean, you've got Sigourney Weaver in there, and Sigourney Weaver gives a depth and a gravitas to that. Not necessarily by being the most kind of astounding character or anything else like that, but the fact that it's Sigourney Weaver that does this. You believe the idea that Sigourney Weaver is a cellist in an orchestra. Now, I'm not sure you necessarily would have got that from any number of different other people who might have had that role at the time. Sigourney Weaver, you get that, and that, yep, I can accept this entirely. She's entirely believable in that role. Even Rick Moranis, who is very much the kind of the comic relief for a large chunk of the film, isn't going too hard on all of this.
No.
Yeah.
And it is a beautiful and wonderful, wonderful movie. And I can rightly understand why many people have a strong love for this particular film. I think this is one of the biggest films of the 80s, certainly one of the most successful films of 1984. And as a result of which, you end up leading to a million and one things. I mean, we've talked about toys, we've talked about, I remember having and there were comics about this sort of thing. And the next thing from this was another interesting one, which was The Real Ghostbusters. Now, The Real Ghostbusters debuts a couple of years later, I believe, in 1986. Why was it called The Real Ghostbusters, though?
The reason for that is because before they could get the cartoon series out, another company called Filmation put out their own cartoon series called Ghostbusters, which was based on a mid-70s show. Columbia Pictures actually bought the rights to use the Ghostbusters name off the makers of the TV show so they could call their movie Ghostbusters, and then Filmation made a cartoon of the 70s show Ghostbusters to cash in on the movie Ghostbusters, which then had to change its name to The Real Ghostbusters. Easy.
Right. Yeah, no, I got that. Don't need a pen and paper to draw that out at all.
See, this is something, I remember at the time being somewhat confused when the Ghostbusters cartoon series showed up, and it was clearly all of the stuff from the movie, but it was called The Real Ghostbusters, and they never made any sense to me until relatively recently when I found out about this.
Yeah, my mum once went out and actually bought what she thought was a real Ghostbusters video for me, and then brought it home and was then completely confused when I basically went, "What the fuck is this? What's this car? Why is there an ape? Why is this called Ghostbusters?" So yeah, she sort of fell into the classic parent trap regarding that one.
Yeah. And it's easily done, and frankly, I mean, there's any number of different filmmakers will go out there and exploit the hell out of that just whenever that's possible. If you ever noticed, I mean, for example, when Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves was on, there were 2 or 3 rival productions, and just before Prince of Thieves came out in the cinemas, there was a rival version of Robin Hood with Patrick Bergin as the titular hero, which came out briefly in the cinema and then kind of almost vanished straight to video. Which is, again, entirely their, you know what, there's a big film coming out. We can do it on half the budget and maybe we can sneak some of the audiences in because they're stupid. And it's commonplace for Hollywood just in general. I think the other thing with The Real Ghostbusters that always threw me as a little bit as well was because they didn't look like their contemporaries on the film.
No, they changed the designs. There was a lot they changed.
Yeah.
They basically, they sort of... Obviously, it was a cartoon series. They recognized that the original Ghostbusters movie, even though it was meant as a movie for adults, there were a lot of things that kids had gotten into.
Oh, yeah,
the
massively.
Technology, the ghosts, etc. So they came up with a kidified version.
Yeah.
Which is, for me, look, I'm not one of those guys who gets all protective of the things they grew up with as a kid and said, no, it must be serious. You must take this seriously. But I'm not like that, but I think it kind of lost something when it got into the cartoon series and then later going into Ghostbusters 2, where it did become very kidified. I think it lost a lot of that wry kind of edge to it.
Talking about kidified, there is another thing that we haven't mentioned here yet so far, and that is a constant bane of various different 80s movies at any different time. The made-for-TV version, or the edited-for-TV version. So, for example, for an awfully long time, now I must have seen this in the movie when I saw it in the cinemas, but my main access to this was the version of Ghostbusters that we had recorded from the television, specifically on ITV when I was a kid. And phrases like, we came, we saw, we kicked its ass, doesn't feature at all. Not on the TV version. And also the, yes, it's true, Your Honour, this man has no dick. Again, I didn't even know. That was one of those things that I'd forgotten. I didn't even know was in the movie until many, many years later when watching unedited versions, because I had the version we'd take from TV.
Yeah.
And they say, oh my God, this has got swears! This has got actual swears in it! And I always thought of it as a kids' movie because it was on at that particular time and there was the edited version. I mean, you have the same sort of thing with, Die Hard or RoboCop or any number of different other movies where you've got essentially either edited or dubbed over swears. Now, we've looked a little bit at the real Ghostbusters. I think we were having a discussion earlier on today when you were suggesting that it had an influence on Ghostbusters 2.
Yeah. Ghostbusters 2 is a movie that I have very mixed feelings about. It's not anywhere near as good as the first one. Part of it, I think, is that it was very influenced by the cartoon series, not just in the design of the ghosts, which were a lot more cartoony, again, a lot more kid-friendly. I think one of the ironies for me is that Stay Puft Marshmallow Man from the first movie, like the climactic gag of that movie is this malevolent supernatural force that's been put into the body of this cartoony, kid-friendly character.
Good one, Dan Aykroyd.
But the weird thing is, it kind of then it becomes kind of the style template for the franchise going on from that point. You've got the cartoon series, and a lot of the visuals of the cartoon ends up in Ghostbusters 2. Probably the most blatant one is Janine.
Yeah.
Janine looks completely different in Ghostbusters 2. She looks like the cartoon version, not the actual Janine from the original.
I remember that bothering me when I saw this, because I saw this on a pirated video in the Christmas of 1989 at the school I was at the time. And I remember being really disappointed at what had happened to Janine. Not because of the fact that I particularly thought Janine was an amazing character, but in the first movie, she is a working office temp girl from New York. She's a clearly rounded, proper person. And then you get to the second movie and she's nothing but exaggerated, irritating comic relief.
She's like an Andy Warhol painting, just colour and shapes everywhere.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When I first saw Ghostbusters 2, I didn't even recognise that was the Janine character. Like, I just went, oh, they've gotten a new secretary. Okay. It could have been because, because of my age, I didn't click that, it was the same character or whatever. Like, I'd missed them saying her name or something. But I seriously thought that they had replaced her with a different character and a different actor. Like, my mind just did not connect them together because I didn't understand why they would do something like that.
Yeah. Like how it's Annie Potts who plays Janine in both movies.
Yeah.
But in the first movie, she's very much like this very mousy character who has this very tenuous romantic link with Egon.
Yeah.
Then in Ghostbusters 2, she's this vamped up sexual tyrannosaur who basically eats Lewis whole.
Yeah.
And it was just a very sort of marked difference between the two movies.
I think this is one of the weird things as well, because even at the time I remember thinking 5 years is a long time for a sequel. And what they do with the characters and how they work, because they've got all the same casting, but the characters are largely changed, possibly with the exception of Winston, Egon, and Ray. But everybody else, there is a marked difference. There is the suddenly somehow Peter Venkman has become a talk show host, and that makes no sense.
Well, it used to not for me, but thinking about it, in the lead up to this show, I kind of realized a couple of things that I actually did want to bring up before with the first movie as well. The relevance of the movie. Like, obviously, when it was first released, the first movie was so refreshing because it was these guys doing this amazing sort of science fiction-y job, but were kind of schlubs in behavior. I actually think nowadays, looking back, it's the fact that they're academics. That they've come from this very sort of comfortable bubble of a field and then thrown out into the real world to try and make it work. And sort of thinking about it, and you look at how it is today, like the first movie was made at a time when going to university was more or less a meal ticket. If you went to uni, you were pretty much guaranteed a good job when you went out. And that sort of gradually changed over the last 20 years. So nowadays, uni graduates don't have any guarantees. They might wind up in some shitty job that they don't really know how to do and have nothing to do with what they studied. And when you look at that first movie, you see these guys get thrown out of this very comfortable academic world, and they try to make their way in the real world. And the thing is, they basically fail. They go out there, no one's interested. There are no ghosts. It literally takes the end of the world for them to be successful. And then going into Ghostbusters 2, it kind of makes more sense that they would decline, because after they beat Gozer and avoid the end of the world, then it dries up again.
I will say this as well. The EPA gets a really bad rap in the first movie. The Environmental Protection Agency, who were doing their job, and basically, because Bill Murray, Peter Venkman, is rude to the guy, and obnoxious and unpleasant, he decides, you know what? Screw you. I'm going to shut down this entirely illegal and unlicensed thing that you haven't even bothered to try and get any kind of regulatory framework here for. And you're complaining that I'm doing... No. They've done exactly the right thing. And basically, it's all down to the fact that Venkman is a rude arsehole that this problem happens.
Yep.
The EPA do a very difficult and time-consuming job, and they get a bad rap on this movie. But moving on from Ghostbusters 1 and 2, we've had this moment so far where you have Ghostbusters 1, cartoon version, Ghostbusters 2, and a few years later, the rebooted cartoon version, which was Extreme Ghostbusters. Now, I'm not very familiar with this one. Have either of you two seen much of it?
No, there's nothing that comes to mind when I think of it. Like, I think of the original cartoon with, like, was it Igor with the blonde hair?
Yeah.
That's the one that sticks in my mind.
From what I can gather from the second version, the Extreme Ghostbusters, it's rebooting it on the basis of this has happened a few years later, and it's rebooting it with Egon and so on and so forth. It didn't have a massive run. I think it was on for about 40 episodes in 1998.
I was probably too busy with Pokemon.
I thought we agreed we weren't going to talk about Pokemon today.
No, I said I wasn't going to talk about Pokemon Go. Can I stop me from talking about Pokemon?
Anyway, talking about gotta catch 'em all. So now we get to 2016. But should we go straight into the 2016 Ghostbusters? Because there has been quite the journey to get here, hasn't there, Kev?
Yeah, basically, Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis spent the better part of 20 years trying to get a Ghostbusters 3 happening, and didn't get very far. There's been occasional rumours that scripts have been going around, that it's almost gone to production and not quite. They wound up pouring most of the ideas into the Ghostbusters video game that was released in 2009, which was quite good, but you could tell from the story that it was a lot of disparate ideas sort of thrown together and didn't really work completely.
No, I think one of the things as well with regards to this is we mustn't forget that Harold Ramis and Bill Murray, after the making of Groundhog Day, had a big falling out. I think largely because of the fact that there was so many reshootings and retakings and so on and so forth. And then Murray just gradually got more and more and more pissed off with Harold Ramis from that.
Yeah, and apparently a lot of the reasons why the Ghostbusters 3 script never got made, that a lot of times Murray was the holdout.
Yeah.
That time and again he would just keep turning it down. And he seems to have always had a bit of a complicated relationship with Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
If you ever want to hear an example of an actor phoning something in, try Bill Murray's performance in the Ghostbusters video game. Like, he delivers his lines like he's trying to get the voice director to fight him. He's so obviously disinterested. So yeah, I mean, it was never really going to happen. And to be honest with you, neither Aykroyd or Ramis were quite sort of the creative forces they once were.
I think there is an element of something like this where when you've had one thing that's been a particularly big hit, and then for a number of years later you have that moment of, oh, things have dried up a little bit. I know, why don't we go back and redo that thing that we were really successful with?
Yeah, and I think that it was, especially during the 2000s, it was very obvious that Sony just weren't interested in pursuing Ghostbusters at all. I suspect actually the video game was more of a test bed kind of thing to see if people were still interested.
Now, fast forward to 2016, and we do get this new version of Ghostbusters. Now, having read an interview with Den of Geek recently, Paul Feig comes across very, very well. It was a really good, in-depth interview, and I should advise everyone to get their asses over to Den of Geek and look at this, because it's really interesting and detailed. From what I can gather from him, this was a movie that was going to get made anyway. Sony had done the, you know what? Yeah, it's time. We're going to reboot this. We're going to do some form of a new movie. Then you get Paul Feig involved, who says, you know what? I've got this crazy idea. Women! And the portals of Hellmouth have opened. Because suddenly, for some reason, having women Ghostbusters is, I believe, raping someone's childhood.
Yeah, wow, they're just... Thank you, Internet. Because we always need reminding of what arseholes are out there. Look, the whole thing's been ridiculous. I mean, there was never anything in Ghostbusters that actually said the Ghostbusters had to be men.
No, exactly.
They just happened to be men the first time.
Yeah.
And a lot of this reaction of people reacting to this idea of what they grew up with and how a possible remake or reboot or whatever somehow ruins that, which it never actually does. And mixed in with a fair bit of misogyny as well, because you bring women into it, and there you go.
Oh no, not the women's. We make everything awful and make everything smell like flowers.
Talking of the women's, here's a clip from the new movie.
Ghostbusters.
Conductors in the metaphysical.
Okay, cool. See ya. Hey guys, which one of these makes me look more like a doctor?
Who was on the phone?
The Stonebrook Theater. There's a goat on the loose.
I'm gonna load up the car.
Okay.
Yo,
Look at this beauty! What did you do to my uncle's hearse?
I fixed it.
Man, this is so inappropriate for this vehicle.
Oh, we have fun.
Nighttime, my lights on. Got me scared. Kinda leave my bed. I see shadows all on my wall. Man, he must be big and tall. Ghostbuster, who you gon' call?
Let's go.
Let's go.
Oh, did you want to?
Sorry, I'll let you.
Next time.
Now, it's starting to look like it's going to be a very good movie, and it has a potential to be really, really good. One of the things as well, I think, again, throwing back to the Paul Feig interview, was he suggested that there had been this idea for a while knocking around of, say, a combination of, say, for example, Channing Tatum, Chris Pratt, Seth Rogen as being new Ghostbusters. And his attitude was always, well, look, those guys are really funny. They're really good. But everything they do is going to be massively overshadowed and in the shadow of Bill Murray, Harold Ramis, Ernie Hudson, and Dan Aykroyd. You have the girls doing this, and suddenly that's not quite the same. It's harder to do a direct comparison. So it means you can have something fresh and new with regards to this. It's an interesting way of being able to, you know what, we've got this old property. It's an old idea, but hang on a minute. Let's try and make it interesting. And
but they haven't tried to make it interesting. Like, if you look at it, it's like, okay, look, we've got the nerdy one, and we've got the black one, and we've got the overly sexualized one. They've gotten pretty much the exact same characters and just swapped their genders. They haven't created, like, a new character for them. They're using the same 4 types that were in the first ones and just gender swapped them.
See, I don't have that much of a problem with the idea of that, because you are going to often find that you will have particular character archetypes work well in a comedic setting. Now, what they do with those archetypes is going to be interesting. We haven't seen this, so we don't know yet.
Yeah.
If they still take those archetypes and do something fun with them, this could end up being very good. Now, for example, Melissa McCarthy, from what I'm aware, is playing the kind of the Egon Spengler. And that's an interesting one as well, because if anything, in that first movie, those character archetypes are much more strictly adhered to, because Harold Ramis's Egon is very much the epitome of incredibly nerdy at all times in every aspect of his personality and how the way he talks, the way he dresses, every last bit of it. This time around, there may be something a little bit different with that. But I mean, look at it. We've got Melissa McCarthy, you've got Kristen Wiig, you've got Kate McKinnon, you've got Leslie Jones, and you've got Chris Hemsworth in this new movie. So again, we've got some people who know what they're doing. And even just from the trailers, Chris Hemsworth is looking like he's doing a very good
dumb blonde.
Yeah,
secretary
exactly.
Role.
Dumb blonde backpacking Australian. Not that I'm suggesting all Australians are dumb or blonde.
I definitely am not blonde. Wait. I don't know. My opinion on this is I've seen the trailers and I'm not impressed. Like, visually, it looks good. It's bright. It's colourful. The ghosts look absolutely fantastic. But it's the characters that grind on me. I watched them. I remember watching like the 2-minute trailer when it first came out and just thinking, I could barely stand these people for 2 minutes. How am I going to sit through like 2 hours of it? And it wasn't because, because they're women and they're raping our childhoods or whatever. I just found that those characters were freaking annoying. I'm not a huge fan of Melissa McCarthy. Like, I find that she does the same thing every time, which a lot of actors do. But the one that she does is it just grinds my gears. I'm like, it's not funny. You were funny like the first time I saw you, but every subsequent time after that, it's just gotten more and more tiring to watch her do stuff.
Yeah. And that's fair enough. See, the thing is, what is interesting about this is we are all here, 3 of us, offering our opinions on what we suspect the new film is likely to be. What we are not doing is reviewing something that we haven't seen. Travis Johnson on Filmink recently did an article about James Rolfe, aka Angry Video Game Nerd, who in one of his YouTube broadcasts basically said, I am not going to go and see this movie. That's fine, you know what? Fair enough. Don't ever review a movie without having seen it. And I think this was the main point that Travis was saying. It was something along the lines of, look, that's fine. You make a statement, you don't want to go and see the movie, that's fine. But don't ever give a review of something you haven't seen, because you can't call yourself a film reviewer as a result of that.
It's like going to a restaurant and just sitting down and not eating any of the food and telling them it's shit, and then telling all your friends it's shit. You can't review something if you don't experience it. That's the whole point of reviewing things.
Yeah. Look, it's something that's a huge bugbear for me. I mean, I've mentioned my own work. I mean, I work as a freelance writer. I've written for websites, etc. And I have what's rapidly becoming a depressingly old school attitude to it. And I know Trev feels the same way. That when you're going out in public and you're commentating on culture, whether it's reviews or opinion pieces or whatever, knowing what the fuck you're talking about is kind of an important skill to have. And you don't just dismiss something. Like, look, refuse to watch something in your own time. Fine. No one's forcing you to go and see something. But if you're going out there and commentating on it in public, you need to know what it is you're talking about. It's just, I get a bit tired of seeing these people come out with their gimmick names, with their little cute little fucking shticks. They have no idea what the hell they're talking about, don't research, have no knowledge of what it is they're going on about, and garner all this attention from complete bullshit. If you're going to go out and put out these videos and get your clicks, do the work. And don't go out there and say you're going to remain willfully ignorant and expect to be respected for it.
Exactly. And what's worse, and this is a perfect indicator of how bad this whole shtick about female Ghostbusters has got. Travis wrote that article and then proceeded to get dog's abuse because he dared to criticize somebody who was critical of this Ghostbusters movie. And this is the thing. I mean, Travis's point is sensible. As we've all said, if you can't offer a review on anything if you've not experienced or seen it. And the idea then that somebody who dares to challenge this kind of idiocy gets leapt up and down on for daring to criticize somebody who's standing up, oh, fuck you and grow up, you dickless idiots.
I mean, look, we all have these things that for whatever reason we just don't take well to.
Yeah.
That we don't like the look of, and we're not really interested in. And look, there's a lot of people out there who love to get all offended about this shit. But the thing is, just because you can go on on internet site and type in the comments, I mean, this is the thing with the internet. Take some responsibility for what opinions come forth from your fingers, because just because you can jump on a website and just type a whole load of fucking effluvor that's uninformed doesn't mean that your opinion should be respected. and don't dogpile someone who actually does the research, who gives it the thought, because you're always going to come off second best.
Personally, what are our final thoughts on Ghostbusters in terms of the franchise, in terms of what we think this movie is going to be like and what we think the future is for this?
I don't know. I'm more enthusiastic about the new movie than I was. I mean, I was the same as Sean in a lot of ways. The first trailers didn't really do a lot for me. But I'm okay with the idea of a reboot. I think it's got a lot of potential. There's some really good word going around. So I'm perfectly up for a new, good Ghostbusters movie. Let's hope that's what we get.
I'm going to go see it as well, like, obviously, because I'm going to see it with you guys. And, you know, I'm not going in with high expectations and being all excited about it, but I'm going to give it a go and check it out because I love Ghostbusters. And if it does turn out to be that I am completely and utterly annoyed by these 4 female characters, I will just spend my time just dreamily gazing at Chris Hemsworth.
That sounds reasonable. I think it's one of those things for me. I'm looking forward to seeing this. It has potential to be very, very good. There is an argument to be said that really this didn't need to happen. I mean, for example, the most recent one I can think of is the most recent iteration of RoboCop. It's a perfectly reasonable movie. It's not terrible, but it lacks the satirical punch of the original, and it's nowhere near as funny. But you know what? As remakes go, or reboots go, it's all right. Didn't need to happen, but it's okay.
You know what I actually learned quite recently, what I realised about all these reboots and all these remakes, is what usually happens in 9 out of 10 cases is the reboot's forgotten after 5 minutes, but everyone remembers the original again.
Yeah.
Like, everyone's scared that these remakes will, you know, wipe the original out of existence, and the opposite happens. Like, that Total Recall, that Colin Farrell Total Recall, the one we all love.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that one?
I saw it once.
Actually, yeah.
Right?
Again, I'm not commenting on it because I haven't seen it.
I mean,
It's got Kate Beckinsale in it. Yeah.
Oh, Kate Beckinsale.
So I remember her.
I mean, get your ass to Mars. I mean, who remembers that? You know?
Nah, this is the thing. Reboots are, like it or not, they are here to stay, and they're going to be here for a while. And it's not like that sort of thing has never been going on before. That was going on right the way back. If you go back to the 80s, go back to the 90s, go back wherever, you've got all these reboots and retellings.
Oh, come on. I mean, go back to the beginning of bloody time. I mean, the history of theatre. The history of theatre revolves around reproducing the same stories, the same scripts over and over again. I mean, it's something that's been key to the evolution of storytelling from year dot.
Exactly. So the idea that people are getting all fussy about the fact that a cherished moment of their childhood is somehow being sullied by the idea of somebody else coming in and going, yeah, you know what, I want to do it differently. Nah, sod you. Sod a lot of yous. Okay, one last final point. If we're going to be talking about reboots here, what movies do you think would really work well with the reboot treatment now, and why? Go for your life. Shonny.
I would have to say Logan's Run. That's one of my favourite movies. I love the whole thing of carousel, and they've got, like, you know, the little special gems in their hands, and you can only live to a certain age, and I would just love to see that done with updated graphics. Well, not updated graphics, but updated technology, you know. Probably updated costumes as well, because they've got that whole, you know, the old kind of jumpsuit feel to them.
It's very 70s.
Yeah, very much so. But I love the original film, and I love the whole story behind it, and I think it would just do well with just an upgrade on, you know, the effects that happen in it. Not change the story, though.
Actually, thinking about this as well, if any of you guys have ever seen The Island...
Yes.
Now, the beginning section of The Island, that is very Logan's Run, isn't it?
Yeah, actually, thinking about it.
See, The Island is half a good movie.
Half.
What about you, Cav? Which movie would you reboot?
Well, for me, the thing I actually want to see happen more often and never gets done is, everyone always sort of reboots or remakes the classic movies. No one actually goes back to movies that had a lot of potential and didn't totally work, and then try and improve them. And it got me thinking Rollerball. Now, I know this was done a few years ago by John McTiernan, who's, you know, generally been one of the greatest action directors ever. I mean, Die Hard, Predator, Christ. This wasn't a good day for him. That remake was bloody awful. But I think it's a classic example of a movie that had a great concept of this futuristic sport and the politicking that goes on underneath, that you could really have a lot more resonance nowadays. It would be a great one to go into from a more modern perspective and have sort of another bite at it, because I always thought with Rollerball there was a brilliant idea there that I like the original movie, but doesn't quite nail it.
Now, here's the thing as well. There are examples where that actually has worked and worked brilliantly well, and the best one I can think of for this is Ocean's 11.
Yeah.
Now, Ocean's 11 is a really, really good movie, but that's a reboot of a Rat Pack movie. And you look at that and you can totally see how, but it's been done well and slick and classily and well cast, and everything just works seamlessly and beautifully. And in many ways, it's probably better than the original movie. See, for me, the one I would be really interested in seeing, and I've heard rumours here and there that it's going to be happening, is The Last Starfighter. Now, I didn't grow up with this film particularly. It was one of those ones that was always available in the video shop, but it wasn't anywhere near the hit it was hoped to be at the time. And the premise is basically back in the era of arcades, and a particular arcade game ends up in a trailer park in the arse end of America somewhere that was supposed to end up in Vegas. And the idea is that these have been seeded all over the galaxy because a massive space war has been happening for one particular civilization. They are running out of people who can fly things, and they figure, you know what? If somebody in these various different places ends up getting a ridiculously high score on that, we can join them, they can become a pilot in our space war.
Oh, kind of like Armada.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Armada takes a lot of its... Armada by Ernie Klein. That gets a lot of its roots from things like The Last Starfighter in terms of its original premise. And a lot of the stuff in Armada is interesting because Armada, the book, deals with the idea of something very, very similar happening, but it's essentially there's a massively popular MMO where there is people kind of all over the world playing in this kind of hyper-realistic scenario of alien invaders, and it turns out that that's actually been a training program being run for years, and people are going to go off and fight invaders. So it does but Last Starfighter starts off some of this, and it's a kind of an interesting twist on the farm boy from the middle of nowhere comes out and saves people in this massive fantasy battle. It was an interesting premise, and it was beautifully, beautifully well done, and it never really got the love or success it kind of should have done at the time.
You know, it'd be interesting as well if you remade that, especially nowadays with, we have drones. Like, we have, a US Army recruiting people who can game to pilot drones. I'll one-up you on this, not just a remake, but you go and make as sort of an indie, ultra-political remake of The Last Werner Herzog's The Last Starfighter. Oh, yeah. Oh, yes.
Oh, God.
That would... 3 people would see it, and that would be me. That would be me going twice. That would be brilliant.
And the other one's Sharon that you just dragged her along.
If nothing else, Werner Herzog, you have to do this before Uwe Boll.
Oh.
I'm not talking about Uwe Boll again. I can't. I don't have it in me.
Okay, well, that just about wraps it up for this discussion. As I say, we will review the new version of Ghostbusters in a future podcast. Meanwhile, Cav, where can we find you?
I can be found on the pages of Metro Magazine. The new issue is coming out very soon, where I'm talking about the Wizards of Oz.
And Shani, where can we find you?
You can find me under PrimaCat on Twitter, also on YouTube if you want to come see my gaming exploits.
And you can find all of us under There Will Be Geek podcast group on Facebook, and there is a There Will Be Geek page on Facebook as well. Meanwhile, I think there's only one final thing to say. We're finished!
Son of a bitch. Sorry, I had to do one more. One more.
That works.